There are only a few games left in the NBA season, and with the Bulls barely holding on to the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference, a simple mistake could be the difference between making the play-in tournament and missing completely. But it's not all out of their control, and actually there's a chance that the Bulls could clinch their spot in the playoffs a lot sooner than a lot of us expect, and potentially even climb in the standings. So we're going to be covering all of that in today's video. But before we get into that, I have one question for you guys, and that's, do you think the Bulls are going to make the playoffs, and where do you see them landing in the standings? Will they be at the 10th seed where they currently sit, or will they be able to climb up the standings to potentially the 8th seed, 9th seed, or 7th seed? Comment all that down below. I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. But let's not waste any more of your time. Let's go ahead and get right into things. As mentioned, the Bulls currently sit with the 10th seed in the East and the last spot in the play-in tournament. And with a record of 3 games below 500, they are just barely on the verge where they could fall in or fall out, or they could climb the standings. There's a lot that's going on, and there's a lot that could change in a short period of time. So the first thing I want to talk about here is, how can the Bulls punch their ticket into the playoffs? Only 7 games remain. 7 games. A very, very short amount. Less than 10% of the season, actually, remain in the year. Not much. And the Bulls have a 2.5 game lead on the 11th seed, the Washington Wizards, and a 3.5 game lead on the 12th seed in the Indiana Pacers. Now what that means for you is they already have that lead, so the Bulls can lose a couple extra games here. Meaning the Bulls would only have to win 5 of the remaining 7 games, even if the Pacers win out and the Wizards win out. If the Bulls win 5 of their last 7, they're guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. That's a pretty good position to be in, the fact that you can lose a game or two and still know that you're going to make it. But not only that, if the Wizards or the Pacers lose an extra game here or there, that makes the Bulls' job that much easier, and especially with a kind of difficult schedule coming up. Now, statistically speaking, maybe not super difficult, but there's still a couple tough competition games in there. Now, as mentioned, the Bulls, 2.5 lead and the 3.5 lead, you could see them clinch very, very early their spot in the playoffs. And if we take a look here, if the Bulls were to win 5 games, and, that would be the scenario where the Wizards win out and the Pacers win out, they'd have to win 5 games. That would put you at a 41-41 record, and that could put you in a scenario where either the Bulls win the next 5, or the Bulls might not know if they clinch their spot until the final game of the year. So worst case scenario, the longest we'd have to wait is the last game of the year. And actually, technically speaking, if the Bulls lose 3.5 more games than the Pacers, and the Wizards win 2.5 more games than the Bulls, therefore all 3 of those teams would have the same record, then the final game of the year for each of these teams would all occur at the exact same time, April 9th at noon. That would mean April 9th at noon would be a huge, huge moment for all 3 of these teams to know whether they make playoffs or not. That is the longest we could have to wait, would be April 9th at noon. And a lot of things would have to fall in situation for all 3 of those teams to have the same record. Nonetheless, it could be a very, very important situation to occur. But best case scenario is the thing that a lot of us want to occur. So the earliest chance for the Bulls to make the playoffs could be this Sunday. This week, days away from now, this Sunday, the Bulls could clinch their spot in the playoffs. And that's a little bit outlandish. You're below 500. You're barely the 10th seed when we're taking a look at it. And you could clinch a spot already. It's a little bit crazy to think about, I know. But let me explain this all to you. If the Bulls win tonight against the Lakers, and then they win Friday's game against the Hornets, there's 2 more games. Now you have a 4.5 lead on the 11th seed with 5 games remaining for you. 4.5 remaining. And the Pacers and the Wizards only have 6 games left. So 4.5 lead on that seed and a 5.5 on the Pacers. You almost eliminated the Pacers. Pacers would be forced to win out, and the Wizards nearly have to win out to make it. That's just if you win the next 2 games, and those are reasonably winnable games. Lakers, You just beat them a little bit ago. Lakers are not a phenomenal team, and the Hornets are one of the worst teams in the league. Those are some feasibly winnable games for the Chicago Bulls. If you do that, you're already in a spot where you're almost clinching. So win tonight's game, win the game against the Hornets on Friday. And if the Wizards lose their next 2 games, which will be Friday and Sunday, and the Bulls win those, the Wizards are out. So if the Bulls win the next 2 games and the Wizards lose their next 2 games, the Wizards are already eliminated. If the Pacers lose their game, their next game, which is on Friday, and the Bulls win too, the Pacers would be eliminated. So, if all those things fall into place, we'll explain this a little bit easier for you guys. If the Bulls win their next 2, the Wizards lose their next 2, and the Pacers lose their next one, the Bulls clinch on Sunday. Very, very fast, and honestly pretty feasible if I have it written down here. Those next 2 games, the Washington Wizards' next 2 games are against the Magic and the Knicks. They'd have to lose both, and all those other scenarios to occur for the Bulls to clinch. Them losing to the Magic may be a little bit questionable, and the Magic technically are still in the hunt for a playoff spot. So nonetheless, maybe not super likely for the Magic to beat the Wizards. Not unlikely, but not super likely. The Knicks to beat the Wizards, that maybe a little bit more likely than unlikely because the Knicks are a better team than the Wizards. The Knicks aren't in the play-in, they're in the playoffs, so they're a pretty solid team there. So decently possible in the Pacers. If the Pacers lose tonight against the Bucks and the Bulls win the next 2, then they're already knocked the Pacers out. And you're playing the Bucks. So I think that's pretty likely here. The Pacers are going to be out of competition for the playoff spot by the end of this week. Then it's going to come down to the Bulls and the Wizards. And, it's not going to take a whole lot. And like I said, Sunday, it could be the deciding factor in all those things. So those are the clinching scenario for the Bulls. And that's great, and I'd love to clinch by the end of the week. But more importantly, I want to see the Bulls climb up the standings. Currently, they sit at the 10th seed. But there's a real shot for them to climb to the 9th seed or to the 10th seed. Maybe not the 7th seed. 7th seed seems a little bit out of reach because the Heat, I think, or the 7th seed, have a 4-game lead on the Bulls with 7 games left. It would take a whole lot there. The Bulls winning out, the Heat dropping a bunch of games. Things that maybe not as likely as we'd hope for. But let's take a look at the 9th and the 8th seed. The Bulls only sit 1.5 games behind both of those seeds. 1.5 games. Not much by any means. So, how can you go about taking that spot away from those 2 seeds? Now, of course, those seeds belong to the Raptors and the Hawks. And the Raptors, I believe, are the 9th seed. The Hawks are the 8th seed. 1.5 games between those 2 teams. Not a huge difference. And you could effectively overtake them this week, once again, on Sunday. Sunday could be a huge game for the Bulls. Huge game. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Or huge day for the Bulls, I should say. Even with a leg behind for the Bulls, they do have a real shot to jump up 1 seed, maybe even 2 seeds. And we'll talk about why that's so important here in a second here. Let's kind of take a look at the remaining schedule for both of these guys. The Bulls have the 12th easiest remaining schedule. Pretty good news. You have an easier schedule. Now, there are definitely some difficult teams in there, but you have an easier schedule. That's a good sign for you. You should be able to take advantage of that and use that to your advantage and be at least above 500 through the remaining, guarantee your spot in the playoffs, and give yourself a shot to climb up the standings. But you take a look at the Raptors, and you take a look at the Hawks. Blanked on that for a second there. The Raptors have the 2nd hardest remaining schedule. 2nd hardest. Okay. 1.5 game behind. You have the 12th easiest versus the 2nd hardest. You're giving yourself a really good shot to potentially climb up over at least the Raptors and be the 9th seed. That's good news. Now, 9th seed maybe doesn't make a whole big of a difference when it comes to things, but it's still better to be the 9th seed than the 10th seed. As for the Hawks have the 6th hardest remaining schedule. So the Bulls, 12th easiest, and the 2 teams that they're competing with, that they're only 1.5 games behind, have both of them have a top 10 hardest remaining schedule, with one of them having the 2nd most difficult. Not only that, but the Bulls also play the Hawks in the last 7 games. And if you get a win there, well, now you're only 0.5 games behind, And the Hawks, having the 6th hardest schedule, you drop one more game than the Bulls? Not super unlikely, honestly. That's good news. And guess what? The Hawks are the most middle team in the league. They're, through the last 26 games, they're 500. The last 24 games, 500. 20, so on and so forth. Literally every 2 games, they're 500. They've been 500 for pretty much the entire year. They win a game, they lose a game. If the Hawks do that and the Bulls beat the Hawks and then go 1 game above 500, 2 games above 500, now you overtake the Hawks. Your Raptors, 2nd hardest schedule, you can overtake them. Now you're the 8th seed. Why is the 8th seed so important? We covered why, or how the Bulls can clinch. We covered how the standings can shuffle and the Bulls can move up. Why is the 8th seed so much more important? Well, if you're the 8th seed, you not only are a better seed, of course, that's important there. Now, you'd love to move to the 7th seed. 7th seed would be amazing. Not super likely, but if you move to the 7th seed, you don't have to go against the number 1 team in the entire league in the Bucks. You would have to go against the current 2nd seed, which still isn't great. You'd rather go against a 4 seed, a 5 seed, but nonetheless, it would be nice to not be the 8th seed and go against the Bucks. But if you're the 8th seed, you can lose the first game in the play-in tournament. If I remember correctly, you can lose the first game in the play-in tournament and still get a shot to make it by going against the winner of the 9 and 10. And if you're the winner of the 9 and 10, you got to play 2 extra games just to make it in the playoffs. So moving to the 8th seed is very, very important for the Bulls. But now that we've wrapped all that up, how can they clinch? How can they move up the standings? And how important is it for them to move up the standings? That just leaves one question, and that question is for you guys. How soon do you think the Bulls are going to clinch a spot in the playoffs, if they do? And where do you see them landing? Will they be 10, 9, 8, or outside? All 3 of those are plausible options. Where do you think they're going to land, and do you think they're going to clinch? How soon? Comment all that down below. I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. And if you enjoyed this content, please like. It means the world to me. And if you want to see more content like this, not only for Bulls content, of course, because the playoffs are coming up, and then, of course, postseason, lots to talk about there, but also some NBA news. I should have my MVP race video coming out soon. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. It truly means the world to me. But as always, I hope it's out some today. Hope it made you smile. Hope it made you laugh. Something really important to me. Affects me today in a great way, because every single day came a great day for you all to put in the effort. And as always, you guys all be safe out there.